This is Akashwani Bengaluru.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of English Talks. I'm Rosalind Matthew and with me is Vijaypura Mahesh. Welcome to the studio, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Mahesh. I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification, also with a management degree. I'm a licensed trainer on mind mapping from Busan, UK.
So we're here today to explore your area of work, that is mind mapping. Can you tell us the relevance of mind mapping?
In a broader sense, it is used in corporates for planning, decision making and problem solving. And when it comes to academics, it is used for registering and recalling and reproducing whatever a student would study.
Where does the question of mind mapping arise? Is it because you want them to perform very well, or is it because you're looking at children who have difficulty in learning?
These days, children find it very difficult to focus on the studies because there are too many attractions for them. There was earlier only television. Now they have a lot of social media, lot other things to manage as well, because that has become a part of their life. Now, at this juncture, mind mapping plays a very major role because it is a stress-free concept which would elicit whatever information that is stored in a student's brain. And also it starts from the stage of registering whatever they're studying. So there is a process and there are certain laws of mind mapping which have to be followed by students. And once they stick to these laws of mind mapping and follow it, the registration and the recollection and the reproduction of whatever they study, these 3 R's would become much easier for them. So they start making certain keywords and colors and codes which are all a part of this laws of mind mapping.
That is how you train them?
Yeah, that is how we train them. Normal process of training, they will have this basics of mind mapping and then we proceed towards the laws of mind mapping. There are 5 laws of mind mapping. The concept of mind mapping hinges on keywords. Just to give you the gist of the importance or the relevance of this mind mapping, in a normal paragraph, we would have something like 75 to 80 words. But actual relevant words which are required for a student to remember would be 20 to 25. The rest of the 50 to 25 words, when the child thinks that is also important and it tries to remember, when in the process of remembering these things, they slip out with the key words, and that is where they lose their focus on the answers.
Mind mapping, is it different for children who are pursuing an art stream or a science stream or any other stream? Is it different?
Actually, this is not different, but of course, this could not be used for mathematics on a greater scale because maths is basically a logic one. You can't eliminate any steps. Mind mapping is a boon for students who are into studies of language, some social science and arts and literature. This is a big boon for them. See, even if the text runs into 25 to 30 pages, that 25 to 30 pages of text is brought into one page, and through one page they will be able to recollect whatever they would have studied. And this mind mapping is their own creation. So it is very easy for them to cull out whatever they have put on the mind map and to recollect. And obviously when they're able to recollect it properly, they would represent it on the paper as well.
When you do this mind mapping sessions, is it for a particular individual child or small group, or is it in a big class?
This is actually a group activity because in the schools we want them to learn from others' mistakes or others' practices. It all depends on their socio-economic background. They're exposed to so many things. So here we may have a very intelligent child combined with a very normal child, so that the normal child also learns something from the intelligent child. At the same time, the normal child may have some extra strength in making a good drawing or using a good color or using a good code. So it's a mutual learning. It's a group activity wherein we'll have more 4 to 5 children in a group, and then they make different groups and learn, and finally they make a map, and then of course they will have their individual mind maps as well. It's a symbiosis.
How does it work? Who introduces the child to mind mapping session? Is it the teacher or the parent, or how does it happen?
Actually, I've been training a lot of parents and teachers and students. These 3 fraternities are interlinked and interwoven to a very large extent in academics. But of course, the present generation does not realize the importance of find out the link between this parent community and the teacher community and the student community. These 3 communities are looked at different heterogeneous sectors, but actually it's homogeneous and it's interwoven. And when we have these three people come to a common understanding, it makes the life of the child much more easier. So that when we teach this mind mapping, I love to have this children sitting with parents and teachers and forming their own groups and studying that. The results of it is fantastic, and the children and of course the parents also would learn from children. Earlier when we were children, teachers were the gateway of information. Now with a lot of this internet coming in, students would Google everything and walk into the class. And there is no way that teacher can make any mistakes. So now, of course, all three are more or less equally loaded with information. So when they sit together and learn this, it makes a great combination.
Can you please share an example of how a session happens and a result thereof?
Now, to start with, see, I'll give you a simple example of, say, children normally find it difficult to remember certain definitions and all. So, to start with, I'll start with this mathematics. So, it's a very normal thing that when I talk about this concentric circle is a circle with the same radius and two different diameter. When the children may miss out, it may be two different centers or same diameter, they get confused. So in order to minimize their confusion and for them to recollect easily, we make two circles, and in between these two circles I just draw polo, which is a peppermint. So any child can recollect this polo, and of course it's much easier to explain it visually. So with the limitation what we have now, that polo, it's very easy for any child to recall. So when it recalls polo, obviously it creates a definition of a concentric circle and goes ahead with this. And when you have these three communities combined in training, so they may have a lot more examples for, say, for a rhombus, then for a trapezium, which are very difficult for the children to remember and recollect. So they may put in their experience and give a simpler definition and simpler terms and simpler pictures for children to recollect and reproduce.
What about the periodic table? How do you go about tackling that?
Oh, periodic table, it's a much bigger issue. Actually, we have a lot of memory techniques also which are involved. So here we have one of the ancient technique called Roman room, where we have this, the child would walk through its own house and they find out they're much familiar with whatever they see around every day in and day out. So we link these things to different elements and different weight and their codes, everything, and we structure it and make the children elicit the periodic table from that and learn it. And it is much lesser, it's strain-free concept which can be very easily used, applied, and the result would be fantastic.
So what motivated you to undergo this training, and where have you undertaken this training? Tell us something about the history of this.
Mind mapping was invented by a person called Mr. Tony Buzan in UK in late 70s. Once I was traveling and I could see this book on the airport. I picked up this book and then I thought it was really interesting. So then I started focusing more on it. And then I went to UK and got trained. And then I started my career with corporates for planning and decision making, as I had mentioned earlier. But then the corporate life was really tiresome. And of course, the returns were fantastic. But then my heart was more with these children. So I shifted. There was a paradigm shift in my thinking towards this academics, and I formed a lot of mind maps, and of course I've written a book as well.
How many trainers do we have in Bangalore?
And of course, in the whole of India, in South India, I'm the only licensed trainer. Of course, there are many people who just read the book and try to train these students and the teachers as well. But I personally feel that, in fact, I've come across many such instances where the person feels that he or she has learnt already by reading the book, does not deliver the required laws of mind mapping or the concept of mind mapping or the way they interpret things or not proper. Because when we get trained, and in fact I was so fortunate to get trained under Tony, because he's no more anyway, but then I was fortunate enough to get trained under him, and there we had a very structured training. And there, of course, I could pass on the training successfully to many students and children, teachers and parents. So we could see the results in their creation of mind maps and their application of that to academics. And of course, you can see there is a website called Busan Asia. You can see among these Asian countries, China tops the list with more than 1,000 licensed trainers on their list. And of course, next comes Korea, Vietnam, and all. I'm very sorry to say that India does not figure anywhere close to these because we hardly have about 8 or 9 licensed trainers on mind mapping from India. It is like unorganized sector where there are many unorganized teachers as well. So we can't consider them as licensed trainers. So China and other countries have recognized the importance of mind mapping and they're applying it. And of course, slowly this is becoming mandatory for Indian children as well. Now, as of now, a lot of ICSE and CBSE boards make it mandatory for them to use their mind mapping in the regular academics. And in the days to come, I strongly feel that the new education policy would have this as part of the normal studies.
Indians are into academics a lot, so why haven't we taken this concept much earlier?
I personally feel that initially it was very expensive and
Or is there an alternative method?
of course, there are a lot of alternative methods. When we were students, we used to make list of keywords in a small piece of paper and we were mugging that and getting into the examination hall. Then we used to write. But now you have a structured mind map where you can just skim through the mind map. And these days I've seen many children, if you give them 24 hours and even if you give them 20 minutes before the examination hall, they still be studying. And I don't find many children confident enough to walk into the examination hall. When we have this mind mapping, they can just skim through, and I've seen their attitude that they're just relaxed and they calmly get into the examination hall and take up their exams comfortably. And this is what I expect from the student community. It has to be stress-free, easy learning with whatever they have. I'm not feeding any external inputs or extra inputs into their brain. We are just collating and getting out whatever they already have it in the mind.
How have you taken this to the corporate sector?
I can say confidently that almost all the Fortune 500 companies are using it. And of course, many of the Indian companies are also using it. You can see many of these American politicians are using it and MPs are using it. And I've seen a lot of the pictures on their background. They're using this mind mapping and all. So this is a very brief introduction of corporate.
What about a person suffering from dementia or, as people age, they have forgetfulness? Do you think it will help using this technique to enhance their memory power?
Yeah, definitely. There is no end for learning. In fact, the children with special needs, I've also taught them. This is where the community of teachers and parents have to come together to handhold this child with dementia. They all three of them are on a common plane. It is very easy for the child for special needs to understand and learn the subject very easily. And when it comes to people who age, all I suggest that is, first of all, you should be confident enough that you're not losing your memory power.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And so, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of this edition of English Talks. Talking to us was Vijaypura Mahesh on mind mapping for a stress-free life. Have a pleasant evening.
This was a presentation of Akashwani Bengaluru.